Hi, welcome to Theology Therapist. I'm Hannah. Welcome. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about doubt and ego. So if you watched last week's video, I made mention of doubt and ego. And so I want to talk to you a little bit more about some of the psychology behind that. So first I want to break down the id, the ego, and the superego. This comes just directly from Wikipedia's page, so I'll link that there, but you can find that if you are interested, you want to look more into it. According to Freud, the id is the primitive and instinctual part of the mind that controls sexual and aggressive drives and contains hidden memories. So things that our brain has stored as memories that have happened in the past, but they're not sort of like readily accessible to us. The superego operates as a moral conscience, kind of tells us what's right and wrong, and the ego dictates between the two. The ego is the thing that moderates the two sort of opposing sides. Ego is derived from the Latin word for I, and it can be understood as having consciousness of being or of understanding one's essence as self, right? You're just a sort of this consciousness of self or of being. And there's a difference between being self-deprecating and having an inflated sense of self, right, for the ego. For Freud, the ego is the realistic moderator between our moral conscience and our instinctual drives. We use this term as like sort of our arrogance, our sense of self, which points back to the Latin use of the word, right? But it doesn't mean that we are arrogant, right? Our ego is our sense of self, that sort of consciousness of self. So how does doubt affect ego? On one side we have anxiety, on the other side we have perspective. So on the side of anxiety, we have second guessing ourselves. We have the doubt that affects the ego in that you become, potentially self-critical, you become judgmental, and there is that sort of, kind of how we look back and we think, oh, I should have done it this way or that way or this other way, right? So in doubt in unproportional or an unhealthy way can cause the ego to really turn in on itself. And that is what creates that anxiety. But doubt in a sort of like a healthy dose can really provide positive perspective and groundedness. So instead of having that inflated sense of self, which tends to be equated with ego, you may, with a healthy sense of or dose of doubt, what can happen is that we have perspective to think, okay, is my way the right way? Is my way the only way? Are there any other alternatives? Are there any alternatives that make sense, right? So this is the sort of beginning of critical thinking. And that isn't a bad process, right? So that is a healthy form of doubt that causes not anxiety, but that causes a critical look at what I'm involved in, what sort of what the things are that I'm attaching to, and addressing whether or not anything else makes sense, or is there anything that I'm missing? And if so, can I include that into my concept of self or ego or kind of others in the world? So we've talked about how doubt affects ego. How does doubt affect religiosity? Religion at its core is an interpretation of visions, sacred text, liminal space, transcendental experiences, okay? And that it being an interpretation means that it's interpreted by other humans, right? And that means that it might be possible that we got it wrong. And so doubt affects religiosity in that it brings in this quality of sort of indescribable, right? This quality of no words. even here, missing words, right? The doubt brings in this quality about something that, like, we're talking about transcendental experiences, we're talking about liminal spaces, right? These things that are difficult to describe. And so doubt is that quality that maintains that mystical experience, that keeps that mystical quality of the experience, right? The thing is that when we have organized religion, doubt is seen as an enemy. And it's seen as an enemy because we have, typically our structure of that works is we have a head, and doctrine is passed through the head to the lay people. And because of that, if one of the lay people speaks up and says, well, wait a second, what about that thing? Are we sure that it's like that? Well, that's gonna really like ruin or mess up this organizational structure, right? And so that's why doubt is seen as an enemy, and it's not only discouraged, but it's sort of rooted out. So the trouble with doubt is that I think even maybe if you see the title of this this video, or you hear me talking a lot about doubt, we may import onto it this negative context that doubt is a negative thing, when actually doubt has a really, I think, positive function in a lot of ways. It's often treated as a threat, like in that in the structure of organized religion, but it really is a function of critical thinking. Critical thinking means that we assess the good and the bad in others' thinking and our own. I think that I'll talk about this more next week, but I think that lately more and more we get really good at assessing the good and the bad in others' thinking, and maybe not so good at doing that for our own. But the fundamental quality of critical thinking is that we do that for our own, right? Doubt allows us to assess whether or not our lived or operative beliefs, our lived beliefs or our theoretical beliefs are aligned, if they are the same thing, if they match. And if they're not, if they don't, doubt has been the thing that's allowed us to create new ones, to create the environment so that our beliefs and our lived beliefs, what we, sort of what our actions say about what we believe, and our philosophical beliefs, our ideological beliefs, that those align. And doubt is the quality that brings those two together. And tying this all together, kind of touching back on what we talked about in the beginning, doubt is the protective factor against intellectual hubris. Doubt allows us to engage in, whether it's difficult conversations with other people, whether it's Republicans, whether it's Democrats, whether it's thinking about religion and someone who maybe is a different religion than us, or is in our same religion but disagrees about whether it's tradition, whether it's ritual, how our religion should kind of take place, our religious rituals should take place. Doubt is the thing that maintains that mystical quality. Doubt is the thing that maintains that ineffable nature of the divine. Doubt is the thing that maintains our ability to be in conversation with a Republican or a Democrat. Because if we are using doubt in a healthy way, it forces us to address whether or not our beliefs are sort of the right and the wrong in our beliefs and in others' beliefs. So if we're with a Democrat or Republican, we are not just thinking about all of the reasons why they're wrong in our rebuttal to all the things that they have to say, but we are actually hearing what they have to say and willing to assess our own beliefs as well. So I think doubt and the ego impact each other in a really healthy way, in a really helpful way. For Freud, ego was the thing that maintained the balance between the id, so the instinct, and the moral conscience. But for sort of in psychology past that, right, that, or from Latin, right, so the id was the that consciousness of being, and doubt is the thing that allows I think that consciousness of being to remain grounded. I'm curious, what has been your experience of doubt in your life, in religious spaces? Was doubt something that was allowed? Was it something that was viewed as a threat? How do you in your own life, even if you're not anymore in religious spaces, how do you view doubt? Is when you're kind of questioning your beliefs, is that something that causes anxiety, or is that something that creates better perspective or groundedness? So I'm curious to hear about your experience with that doubt, and if you feel comfortable, you can leave that in a comment, you can send me a message, but I'd love to hear from you what your experience with that has been like. I look forward to hearing from you. Remember, press the subscribe button, and I will see you next week.